Hello, ParDreamin. Welcome to Jenna Mobley's session. For those of you that are joining us here for the first time, we're really happy to have you here and we hope you enjoy this session. We have the amazing Jenna Mobley here today to talk about how to customize your forms, build better forms, more attractive forms, and I, for one, am super excited for this session, so I can't wait. We'll just go through a few housekeeping before we hand over to Jenna. As we go through the session, please feel free to pop any questions you might have to the session. For those of you that are joining us here, apologies for that. I think we had some technical issues there. We're back on. So as I was saying, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And if we've got time, we'll go through them at the end. And just a reminder, the session will be recorded and it will be available in the event page roughly around 2 hours after we finish. So if you're ready, Jenna, I'll hand the stage over to you.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Can you let me know in the chat if you can hear me? Yes,
Jenna, I can hear you. Sorry, I heard the panic in your voice. I think if you're getting the spinny wheel of death, give your page a refresh. Apologies for the technical issues at the start, but I believe we're all okay now. So let's get the show on the road.
Yes, all good. Thank you everyone for joining me for my session today, how to customize your Pardot form like a pro. I'm Jenna Mobley. I'm the Marketing Operations Manager at Dooley, and let's dive right into it, shall we? So first, I'll be providing some tips on what you can do to your forms for the best user experience. These are just easy things that you can do within Pardot, easy settings you can implement to just make it better for your users. So tip number one is place labels above the form field. So why would you want to do this? If you have different localized versions, for example, things in different languages, and sometimes it might wrap weird if you have the label on the left-hand side, so you might want to do that for a better UI. Another reason to do this is for a better responsive design, so when it collapses on mobile, it's still not squished on the left-hand side there. And one other reason to do this is there's been some studies saying that left-aligned labels could cause slower completion times because of the visual distance between the label and the input field. So just another reason why you would maybe want to implement this. How you'd implement it is you go to the look and feel section of your form, click on the styles tab, and then update the label alignment from that drop down to above. Tip number two is update the required field character. So the default required field character in the form is an image. It's like a yellow star looking thing. You've probably seen it. This makes it difficult to see on dark backgrounds or colored backgrounds. So again, an easy change that you can make to your form is navigate to the look and feel section of your form, click on the styles tab, and change the required field character to just the plain star. Tip number three, a displayed value versus a stored value. So you have an option to select the bit value that you want to store in your Pardot database, or select one that you want your Pardot users or prospects to see. So to do this, you can edit the drop-down field, click on the values tab, and click on this A icon right next to the form field, and then you can select the display value, and this would be the bit value that your prospects see when they complete your form. Tip number 4 is know when to use a radio versus a checkbox. So a radio button is great for when you want to capture one selection, and a checkbox is when you want to capture multiple selections, or if you only have one option, example being an opt-in checkbox. This is something that I see people not know how to differentiate a couple times, so I decided to put this in here. Next up is how to customize your form to match your brand. So this is using CSS and stuff like that to make sure that it matches your brand. So there's some settings within your form editor that allow you to customize your Pardot form. This allows you to customize your font family, the font color, the font size, and then any other customizations that need to be done via CSS, unfortunately. So how do you do that using CSS? If you don't know CSS or you only know a little bit, there's this Pardot form style generator that's been created by me, which is a point and click type of tool where you can just select your color, select your fonts, all that type of stuff, and it will generate that CSS for you. I do have the link within the slides here, but you can also just Google Pardot form style generator and you can get the link there. If you do know CSS, you can use the Pardot form CSS framework to know which CSS selectors to use when you're customizing your form. Or you can use some of these examples that I'm going to show you in the next slides. First things first, adding the CSS to your form. You can add it in a couple of different places within your form. So you can add it to the form tab within your layout template. You can add it to the layout tab within your layout template, or you can add it to your below form or above form section of your form. The first two options are great if you want to use that style for all different layout templates. So any landing page that use that template, any form that's embedded on that layout on that landing page will have that style placed. Anything for below the form or above the form, that would be on a per form basis. So anything that you'd want specific to that form, that's what you would want to put the CSS in. So the first example is unbolding a form label. So by default, all required fields will have bolded labels. So this is how you would select the form and make the labels not bold. And you can see here that everything that we do, it's going to have this hashtag Pardot form, and then it's going to have a selector here, and then here I have the font weight equals normal. And I think that that just makes it look a little bit nicer there because we already have the asterisks here for the form. Next thing is customizing the label. So adding different font families, adding the color. So you probably want to add whatever font your website uses, for example. Maybe adding some padding at the bottom between the form field and the label, and then again, adding the different color. Next thing is styling the input field. So in this example, I've added a border. So this is a little bit of a light border compared to this dark border, which is the default, and then added some padding between the form labels here, and then adjusted the font size. Next thing is customizing the submit button. So here I just made the submit button the ParDreamin purple, added some of my fonts here, added some padding, and updated the font size. Last thing is centering the submit button. So here I just did text align center over the container that holds the submit button, and that makes the text buttons centered. You can also add a background color to your form like I did here. You can also style the error messages. So on the left here, you see what it would be out of the box. And then on the right, you see how I customized it. And here's the CSS that you would use to learn that. And there's also some advanced ways to customize your form. I won't be covering these today, but you can do a quick Google search. The slides will be provided to you afterward with the links to these. One of the things that you can do is create floating labels. So when you click into the input of the label actually goes from inside like a placeholder to above the label. You can customize your checkboxes and radio buttons, so changes the different colors of the radio buttons and checkboxes. You can create a paragraph style form, which you can see a screenshot of this on the right-hand side here. You can create a horizontal form, so all the form fields are in the same line. Most people use that for like a subscribe now type of opt-in, and you can create a 2-column form. And these are just ways to show you that your Pardot forms do not have to be boring. You can use CSS, JavaScript, all that type of stuff to make them match your brand, to make them more attractive to your prospects, etc. So next is using JavaScript to extend your form functionality. So I'll give you some examples of some JavaScript that you can use to just make your forms better. You don't have to copy and paste any of this JavaScript. Again, the slides will be available to you after. So first, where to place JavaScript within your form, you go to the under the look and feel at the below the form section, click on the HTML button within the WYSIWYG editor and add the JavaScript. So the first thing you can do is use a hidden field to capture the page URL. So this would be that if you're filling out the form, you would get the page URL of the person or the website that you are filling out the form. So there's the JavaScript there. You can do the same sort of thing, but capture the page name. So you'd edit the hidden field within the form, click on the Advanced tab, add the CSS class with the name get page name, and insert the JavaScript into the form. You can also add text before the submit button. So this can be used to place a privacy policy statement before the submit button, and you just add this JavaScript to your form, and then update the message, which I have right here. You can also add placeholder text. So this is when the text is within the form field labels or form field inputs, and this would be the JavaScript that you'd put in the form there. And that's all we have. I know we have a lot of questions here, so I want to make sure we get to those. And yes, the slides will be sent out after the presentation. So yeah, no need to copy all this stuff down.
Thank you, Jenna. That was absolutely amazing. It was, wow, there were so many tips in there. But yeah, don't worry, people. The recording will be made available, the slides will be available, so no need to be writing anything down or copying and pasting. Everything will be available up to 2 hours after the session. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of time for some questions. Let's go back and have a look. What have we got? So I'm going to go all the way to the top because there are so many questions, Jenna. Everybody's so intrigued on how to make their Pardot forms better. So let's have this one here from Kayla. So why would you put the field name above the input field if you have the choice of putting the field inside the label inside of the field? So Kayla's talking about putting that first name at the top of the box rather than having that label field inside of the box. What are the pros and cons of not having that name above the field?
I think you're referring to placeholder text. So placeholder text, I feel like, is great for shorter forms. I find that if I have to fill out a longer form, I usually forget while I'm inputting it, but I'm actually filling out. So I have to delete it again and figure out what that field label is. So it's better for a little bit for accessibility, I would say.
Great. And then this one from Deanna, we've got, can you talk about the CSS form selection in CSS in the style selection of the layout template? So a bit more around CSS formatting on the forms.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean, Deanna. I don't know if you're referring to where you actually put the CSS. Typically, I would put it always in the layout template somewhere, either on the form tab or the HTML tab. I only put it within the actual form if it's a one-off. So anything just specific to that form rather than specific to every landing page.
That's great. Oh, I think this is a really good one from Jay. So can we add fonts other than those available in Pardot if we want to get customizable on the fonts? Can we do that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to add other fonts is to use the Google font library. And there's a couple options when you embed those fonts into Pardot. There's this @import method, which Google will give you that option to do, or there's an option to link it, and always use the @import method.
From Sabine, can we have another email validation that other than the one that's provided in the form?
I haven't done anything in that regard. One thing that I know you can do is block free email addresses. I think it's a setting if that's what you're looking to do, but otherwise I haven't done anything custom validation wise.
And Jackie, do you need special access to get all these tips, or can anyone start implementing these tips that you've gone through today?
Yeah, anyone can start implementing them.
Yeah, for those that are asking, you don't need to keep up with all of this. You'll get the recording and the slide decks as well. I think this is a really quick session, so there's a lot to take in, but everything will be available. Oh, there's just lots of praise for you, Jenna.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Here's one from Dave. Is there a way that if a student or a minor submits the form to scrub their submission and not enter the info into Pardot?
That's a great question. I have not tried that before.
You could possibly look at automation rules on there, so they would go into Pardot, but then maybe add them to a deletion list based on some kind of fields. Maybe another way to look at that one, Dave. And then any tips for confirmation pages?
Do I have any tips? I don't think I have any tips.
Just scrolling through, seeing if we've got any questions, make sure we don't miss any of them. Oh, Sarah, any tips for mobile responsiveness on the Pardot forms?
Yeah, you have to use percentages instead of pixels. So most of the forms would use pixels for the stuff like the width, the field width, all that type of stuff. So you'd want to use some CSS to change everything to percentages. That way it will scale down when you go on mobile.
And from Anna, what's the difference between putting JavaScript above or at the bottom of the form?
Good question. I always do it at the bottom because I think I was taught early on that if you put it at the bottom, all the stuff on the page is already loaded, so it kind of loads last. I don't know if I'm crazy about that, but that's the way that I've always done it.
I think that's a great answer, Jenna. Yes, we'll need to pop a link to your blog in here, Jenna, just so people can get even more tips on there.
Thank you, Christina.
I think that's everything. I think that's all the questions that I've managed to capture. There's just so much praise for you, Jenna. So many. It's really amazing, this session. It's a great way to kick off ParDreamin. It's fantastic to see. If you do have any questions, we've got a couple more minutes before the session ends. There's one from Kelly. If you use WordPress, what's the advantage of using Gravity forms over form assembly?
Good question. I've only ever used Gravity forms, and I know that you can easily integrate a form handler, a Pardot form handler with it. I don't think I've tried it before with form assembly. There's a question from Aaron. Is it possible to default a checkbox to true when somebody initially visits the form using JavaScript? Yes, you can use it with JavaScript. I've done that before. One thing to note, if you're doing it for an opt-in field, so in some countries it's not like compliant to pre-check a checkbox for an opt-in field. So that would be my one flag if you're planning on doing it for that reason.
Nancy's asked, so all these tips that you've gone through today, Jenna, are they available to use only on the Pardot form for external pages, or will they apply on the Pardot landing pages as well?
Yeah, Pardot landing pages as well. Anything that uses a Pardot form or embedded form, it will work within those. It will not work within a form handler.
And any courses that you could recommend to get to know CSS in Pardot forms better, to have a greater understanding of CSS?
CSS in general, there's a lot of courses out there. I would recommend just taking a CSS course if you're not very familiar with that, and then using something like the Pardot framework that I have to learn how to customize your Pardot form better. The one course that I like is, I think it's called like CSS Basics at codeacademy.com. It's a free course. It's kind of hands-on, kind of like Trailhead is, and I really recommend that one.
Christopher asks, is there a way to add file uploads to the form?
No, there's no way to do that, but I've seen people use the confirmation page to redirect them to like a Dropbox or something like that to upload a file there. Otherwise, you can look into doing a form handler using another form tool.
Got this great question coming from Paul. So when is it best to use forms and form handlers? So what's the difference between the two, and in what situations would you use a form handler over a Pardot form?
Yeah, usually if you want, for a Pardot form handler, you would want the data to be going somewhere else. So into another database, for example, that is a great use case. You want it to go into Pardot and somewhere else. If you already have existing forms on your website, you might want to use a Pardot form handler instead of recreating that form in Pardot. Usually I recommend using an embedded Pardot form while you can, because there's things like a progressive profiling, bot protection, all that type of stuff you can use within the Pardot embedded form.
Amy asks, do you usually embed your forms within the iframe? She has a problem with the height when the form is in the sidebar.
Yes, so I actually have a blog post on this topic of how to automatically resize that iframe. So you can Google that. It's just you have to just put some JavaScript in the iframe and on your website, and it will resize based off of the screen size. So that usually fixes the scroll bar problem.
Then we've got a bit more of a technical question from Mike. So he has two form handlers that require capture validation on the same web page. They've used JavaScript to make this happen, but it only works on one of the pages, on one of the forms on the pages. Would you have any ideas on any troubleshooting tips on that?
No, that's a weird one. I have no idea why I would be doing that.
Another question in the last 2 minutes before we finish. So is there a way to show the different success content based on a field or a hidden field selection?
Ooh, I think you're meaning maybe a different thank you page. You can select a different thank you page using JavaScript. There's a script, I think it's on maybe the Pardot website or something like that. Yeah, if you Google Pardot different confirmation pages, it'll show you how to do that.
Yeah. And I think finally, our final question from Dave. Is there a way to get a third-party form using the form handlers to get the data into B2B form reporting, B2B MA form reporting, or is that only Pardot forms? So I think Dave's asking about using form handlers for third-party forms. Can we get that information into B2B MA, or do we just have to have Pardot forms?
Great question. I'm not sure the answer to that one.
Great. I think that's all we've got time for, guys. Really appreciate everybody's input. Really appreciate your time, Jenna, and all that you've taught us in such a short amount of time. It was an absolutely amazing session. So yeah, we wanted to thank our sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to make this happen. So make sure you pop over along to the sponsored booths, learn about more what they do, and make sure you get them points stacked up to win some amazing prizes. We've also got a great session coming up in the next couple of minutes on privacy changes and the future of marketing. So pop along to that one if you can. Otherwise, head over to the agenda, find another session that suits your needs, and have fun for the next few days. Thank you once again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.